Harvard Divinity School.
Psychedelic Exceptionalism is Killing Us. February 17th, 2024.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here and being with us, both on Zoom and in person after a long day of many exciting and thought-provoking and moving and so on and so on. Incredible panels all around. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And I have the real pleasure of introducing our final keynote and the final talk for the day, and that's Professor Carl Hart. Carl Hart is the Mamie Phillips Clark Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry at Columbia University. He's also a research scientist at the New York State Psychiatric Institute. Professor Hart is one of the world's preeminent experts on the effects of drugs on the brain and behavior. He has published more than 100 scientific and popular articles in the area of neuropsychopharmacology. He has received numerous awards for his research and his teaching. His book, High Price, was the 2014 winner of the Penn E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award. He's also co-authored a textbook, and his latest book, which I highly recommend to everyone, is Drug Use for Grown-Ups, which really truly has changed the national conversation on responsible drug use. In 2022, the American Association for Social Psychiatry recognized his contributions to human rights by presenting him the Abraham L. Halpern Humanitarian Award. It's truly a pleasure to welcome Carl Hart. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming here today on Saturday. I know you could be doing something else, like maybe at church or something like that, what some people worship. I know it's been an exciting day today, and I'm gonna try not to dampen your enthusiasm. But really, this is my favorite topic, drugs, that is. It really is. But sometimes, you know, we have to talk about some things that's difficult. And so today, just judging from my title, I think you understand that this is going to be a difficult conversation. My goal today is a kind of simple goal. One of the things that I learned in teaching is that you just want people to take away 1 or 2 points from your lecture, your talk. The same is true here today. All I'm trying to do is to help you all see that this thing we call psychedelic exceptionalism, where one thinks that their drug is more superior, better, whatever adjective you like to use, I'm going to show how that sort of thinking is not only dangerous, but it has become deadly in the United States. And so when you have a message like this, I think you all should know a little something about me before we start to talk, okay? Back in the 80s, I was in the US Air Force, you know, so I did my time in the military. And so for all the right-wingers who don't like what I have to say, you know, I'm a patriot, so don't get it twisted. So I did 4 years in the military, and between 84 and 88. And then in 1988, when I was trying to decide whether I would get out or would I continue on with my education that I started in the military, I had to really think about what I was going to do. Now, at this time in the 80s in the United States, we thought that crack cocaine was the enemy of the country. And so me wanting to serve the community, I thought one of the best ways I could do that was to learn as much as I could about drugs and then use those skills to help other people, particularly people who were suffering from drug addiction. And so that's what I did, you know? I traded my M16 for a pipette, right? And this is me doing my dissertation at the NIH, pretending to be dorky, you know? But the point is, I was really enthusiastic about this new pursuit because I thought I was doing something that was serving the broader community, something that would help people. And so I just want to tell you, like, how what my mindset was in that period, like between 1990 and 2000. That was the decade of the brain. And so we pumped a lot of money into training people in the neurosciences in terms of so we could understand how the brain was working. And that's where I pursued my PhD in the neurobiology of these drugs. So my demeanor was excited. My motto was, I don't come to bow, I come to conquer. I thought I would be a professor at a major university and maybe win the Nobel Prize for what I found. And again, like I said, I'm a patriot, right? Fast forward 20 years or so later, my demeanor has changed. My demeanor has changed in part because what I was learning in my science and what I was learning about our country. So now I'm battle hardened. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. My career aspirations is just survive. And my relationship with the country, disappointed. 30 years later, you can see the demeanor. This is the person that you have before you today. Country's in a horrible shape, or the people who are leading the country. It's remarkable. And so as a result, I suffer from PTSD, not from the military, but from the bullshit that happens in the country. You know what I'm saying? And so my motto now is that I don't engage with people who don't respect evidence. I mean, it's a waste of my time, and I got fewer years left on the planet than I've already lived, so I can't do it anymore. Now, you can see what my relationship is to the country. I am looking for a new home. So I live outside of the United States part-time, about half and half as a result. But I just wanted you to know who you have before you today. Now, what I like to do is go back to the 80s when I was so enthusiastic about this endeavor. Just briefly go back to the 80s. So I just kind of give you all a sort of recap or just summarize what was going on in the 80s. Now, before 1986, really, but late 1985, cocaine, powder cocaine, was seen as a glamorous sort of pursuit. The wealthy, the folks in Hollywood, this was their drug. But by the summer of '86, cocaine, specifically crack, had been disparaged and vilified. Now, this happened in part because of the incessant attention that was paid to this drug. In part because this is Boston. Have you gotten over Lynn Bias's death yet? So nobody does. You guys know about what happened with Lynn Bias? Okay, Lynn Bias was the Celtics' #1 draft pick in 1986, second overall pick in the NBA, the heir apparent to the Larry Bird throne. He died after being drafted. He went out, celebrated, he died. Crack cocaine was blamed for his death. Later, we discovered that he didn't smoke cocaine, but he had used cocaine along with other stuff. He died. But the story was crack cocaine killed Lynn Bias. And then a week later, the Cleveland Browns cornerback, he was the rookie of the previous year, Don Rogers. He also dies, and he had cocaine in his system. People speculated it was crack. And so now, by October '86, President Reagan declares that October '86 is crack cocaine awareness month, and he cites these two deaths as the reasons that we have to really go after this drug. And so the entire country was ready to deal with crack. And crack was blamed for all that ailed our society. And so that meant that the people who used crack were vilified, as well as those who sold crack. Now, one of the things that we did that's important, well, Congress did the only thing that they could do. They passed a law. And this law is now infamous. This is the crack powder law. This is the law that punished crack cocaine violations 100 times more harshly than powder cocaine violations. Now, it's important for us to know that this wasn't a Republican sort of law. This wasn't a Democratic law. They agreed on this law. People like Joe Biden, Democrat, of course, Charles Rangels of New York, a powerful Democrat in the House, all of those guys co-signed or co-sponsored this bill. And the Black Congressional Caucus, more than 80% of their members voted for it. And so we all, me included, thought that crack was the enemy, and it was the thing that was doing this horrible thing. Now, you may know by now that crack and powder are the same drug, right? If you focus your attention on the left, that's powder cocaine. On the right, that's crack cocaine. The only difference is the red circle, and that red circle, I have circled the acid. This is what you call, this compound is what we call I'm sorry, this is powder cocaine, and it's composed of this here acid, which is hydrochloride, and the base, which is cocaine. Crack is just the removal of the hydrochloride portion. That's it. But in terms of the behavioral or the biological effects, the hydrochloride portion doesn't have any effects. And so the effects are in the base. And the only sort of difference that we see is based on route of administration. But in the 80s, people believed that crack was so much more dangerous than powder. So we had to have this law that expressed our concern and this danger. Now, in 1988, this law was extended such that it now punished people who were convicted for the first time, and it also went after the folks who were just simply possessing the drug. Importantly, this law, it really increased or boosted the war on drugs, if you will. This is just drug control. So I'll use the term war on drugs, but I simply mean our control of drugs, how our efforts to control drugs. Now, it really boosted the budget. It also enhanced this program called the Disposition Service Program, where local police forces got military equipment or surplus military equipment. And it set the goal for the country to be drug-free by 1995. This was in the law. How'd that work out? This was actually written in the law, and then as a resort, in order to achieve this, we had these things we call drug-free community laws. Universities participated in this as well, went to drug-free with the drug testing in the workplace, urine testing. All of these sort of things were in service of this goal of having the country be drug-free in 1995. Importantly, one of the most important things that this law did, it really solidified and codified our drug war in terms of the budget. You can see how the budget dramatically increases till today, where we're spending more than $40 billion in our drug control efforts. And that was one of the major points of the war on drugs. The war on drugs is really there to make sure we have this funding stream. That's one of the main reasons. Another reason is that it allows us to go after people that we don't like, but we can't explicitly say we don't like these folks. So the drug war is ideal because you say, you're not going after those people, you're going after drugs. Of course, when you put your efforts in various communities and you see who's arrested and you see who isn't arrested. Now, if we're just thinking about the crack powder law, more than 80% of the people who have been arrested and convicted for those laws are Black. Now, in the 80s, we believed that Black people were the primary users of the drugs. Not so. That's just white folks always made up the majority of crack smokers. I mean, just the sheer numbers in the country will tell us that. But Black folks are disproportionately arrested for these laws. Now, this situation now is well known in the country. It was known in the early 2000s, so much so that along came Barack Obama as presidential candidate. He said that judges think that this law is wrong, Republicans think it's wrong, Democrats think it's wrong. Everybody thinks it's wrong, but it's been approved by Democratic and Republican presidents because nobody's been willing to brave the politics and make it right. That's gonna end, he said, when he's president. Did it end? Well, in the Barack Obama kind of way, kinda, right? The law, the differential treatment under the law hasn't, it has been lessened. It hasn't been eliminated, it's been lessened. And so this year sort of lessening was the sort of compromise that happened under Barack Obama. Now, you know, we know in politics, compromise is just how things are done. And that's not a crime, but it is a crime in my mind to act like you have a victory when you promise something else. And Obama stepped away like it was solved and like he was victorious. As I pointed out, even to this day, last year's data showed that Black people represent more than 80% of the folks who were arrested under that law. Now, with that as background, because that kind of gets into this issue where we thought about crack being bad, whereas powder cocaine is good, this sort of exceptionalism. Now, fast forward to today. I've been thinking about this issue in terms of the latest sort of, or this resurgence of psychedelic use in the country, or resurgence in the popularity of this class of drug. I mean drugs like LSD, drugs that you all have been talking about today, psilocybin, DMT. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, thinking about why people might engage in this sort of exceptionalism. And some people might actually, believe that, yeah, these drugs they're plant medicines. They're not like those synthetic drugs or whatever opinion you have of those. And these plant medicines are important for our emotional healing, our physical healing, and traditional cultures use these plant medicines. And so, all right, thinking about that, then I think about arguably the quintessential plant medicine, the opium poppy, which contains morphine, codeine, opium, but we don't consider this one of the plant medicines, in part because of the vilification that has happened in the country in the past decade or more of opioid drugs. In fact, opiates are not included here, but certainly opium throughout history was one of the most important sort of compounds in terms of helping humans deal with pain, helping humans deal with emotional distress, a wide range of things. And so when I think about plant medicines, I think about a range of drugs, even cannabis, even cocaine, which I will talk about in a second, but particularly as it relates to this sort of spiritual or these religious journeys. So some people think that this pursuit is unique to this class of drug. It's not. In South America, they've used cocaine for centuries in religious ceremonies and so forth. I mean, people have even used cocaine. The Peruvians in the 17th century, they would put cocaine in the mouth of the deceased in hopes of helping that person transition more smoothly to the next life. And so cocaine, but we don't think of cocaine as one of these sort of plant medicines. Another reason I was thinking about this too is like the opioids say, well, people get high with cocaine. So maybe that's why we're acting as if these drugs are somehow different, special, unique. So let's think about, as I think about the high versus the not high. So when I think about analgesia, this is lessening of pain, or I think about spiritual transition. That's okay as long as you're doing that. But if you're having a good time, if you're doing this just to have a good time, that's not okay. I know that this is how we think about this sometime in the United States, and what a childish sort of concept. In part because it's difficult to disentangle these sort of deeply personal constructs from each other. It's hard to disentangle pain relief from feeling good. It's almost a silly thing to do, but even in science today, we say things like, we're trying to develop pain medications that people don't feel good on. That is the silliest thing it's remarkable. You want medications actually to kind of have some sort of reinforcing effect, then people will actually take them. And so this notion that a drug has to not get you high, it's really silly because what we consider being high or feeling good is so subjective and idiosyncratic that it's almost a silly conversation. Another silly conversation that we like to get into is how do we determine which drugs are psychedelics? And we get into this conversation so we can draw boundaries around our drugs and make sure those drugs are excluded. By extension, the people who use those drugs are excluded. And so, again, I just want you all to understand, and I'm going to show you how this happens or how this is so. When we think about classifying drugs, any drug, including this class of drugs, it's really discretionary, and it's dependent upon whoever is doing the classifying. I mean, that's really what's going on. Okay, all right, let me just give you an example quickly. So on the slide, if you focus your attention to the left, that's methamphetamine. On the right, that's MDMA. Now, the only difference is the methylene dioxy ring. MDMA's name is methylene dioxymethamphetamine. It's an amphetamine, people. But we oftentimes include it with the psychedelics. Now, we don't include something like methamphetamine because methamphetamine has been sufficiently vilified and associated with groups we don't like poor white people. And it was also associated with gay men at one time. We like them now, but we didn't before, right? And so that, I don't, that's no disrespect. That's just how we have been as a country. Methamphetamine was considered a white trash drug. These are the words of the former governor of Oklahoma, Frank Keating, what's his name? Back in '99, he made those comments. But I just want to tell you, we bring people into the lab and we study all of these drugs under double-blind conditions. So we know a lot about these drugs. All of the vilified drugs, the psychedelics, we study them carefully in the lab, and thanks to your tax dollars. And so while we are steady slagging them off, as the British say, or slandering them, we are studying them in the lab and not seeing these detrimental, horrible effects that we are attributing to them in the natural ecology. And so this goes on every day in places like Colombia. Even here, they've studied these drugs. Hopkins, University of Kentucky, a wide range of places have studied these drugs carefully without incident. I mean, without these kind of studies, I wouldn't be before you today. I wouldn't be a tenured professor today without the war on drugs. So I just have to make sure you understand my role that I played in this as well. So back to the studies. So in this particular study, we compared MDMA to methamphetamine. What we saw is that the drugs produce a lot of overlapping effects. Yeah, they had some divergent effects as well, but they produce a lot of similar effects, like good drug effect and so forth. In another study, we looked at MDMA, compared it to methamphetamine on things like on verbal performance. What we saw is that methamphetamine actually improved performance, whereas MDMA disrupted verbal performance. But MDMA is the one that we consider a psychedelic, and methamphetamine is the one that we vilify. Now, remember, they're both amphetamines. Now, in turn, what does this mean, this sort of vilification of these drugs? What it means is that, for example, it means that we can go after the people who are using those drugs, the people who are selling these drugs, right? So these are data from the latest data from the federal drug convictions. What you see here in the green here is that the largest number of people have been convicted for methamphetamine. This is the case. Marijuana used to be the one, but now it is methamphetamine, since we have liberalized many of our marijuana laws. And you should know that methamphetamine now is punished more harshly than any other drug in our system. And the people who are primarily paying the price for this are Latino Americans. They are the ones, they represent more than 40% of the people who are arrested for methamphetamine in the United States, whereas they represent 20% in the general population and 40% in this population. But if you really look at it fairly, they don't really represent 20% of the population, because we're really talking about Latino men, right? And so it's really like about 10% of the general population, and then 40% of the folks who are arrested for methamphetamine. So they're paying the price for methamphetamine. Now, as we travel around the world, our sort of rhetoric hasn't been lost on the world, because they are also participating in this war on drugs. I have a picture of former president of the Philippines, Duterte. Duterte, his drug war killed thousands of people in this sort of extrajudicial way. And his main sort of focus was methamphetamine, because he said that if a person used methamphetamine for a year or more, they were irretrievable. There was no reason to try to rehabilitate the person because you couldn't. And then so you may as well kill them. And that's what they did in the Philippines. They did a similar thing in Thailand. And they have subsequently loosened their drug laws, particularly around methamphetamine. But this sort of exceptionalism is literally killing people. Now, another drug, let's think about these two drugs. On the slide here, I have phenylcyclidine, PCP, on the left, and on the right, ketamine. These are two anesthetic drugs, or that's just how they were first developed as anesthetics. PCP first. PCP was considered an effective anesthetic. One of the reasons that its clinical utility kind of waned was because its effects were a bit too long. It's what we call an NMDA antagonist. That's a type of glutamate receptor. It binds to the receptor quite well with high affinity, and it makes its effects last too long. And sometimes people report like this increased depersonalization long after having taken the drug. As a result, ketamine was developed by altering the PCP structure. And so PCP and ketamine produce many of the same effects. They are very similar drugs, excepting that ketamine's effects don't last as long as PCP's effects. Now, some of you all know that PCP, the sort of narrative, the public narrative that's driven largely by police, is that when people take PCP, they become violent, aggressive, they even develop superhuman strength. They need to be shot 28 or more times in order to subdue them. This is not news, right? You all know this, right? Right? So those narratives are out there, so keep that in mind when we think about PCP versus ketamine. We've studied ketamine in the lab for a number of things, largely to treat substance use disorder. With some success, which is a lovely thing. Ketamine is also now approved as an antidepressant medication. It's a lovely thing. Back to PCP. When I was writing my last book, I was reviewing the literature to see what was said about PCP really in the literature. And the bottom line is that people who have looked for this sort of violence that is claimed by the police, they didn't find it. They haven't found it, like you would not expect to find it if the drug is like ketamine. But because it's not true does not mean that it won't be said. You guys live in America, you know what this is about. So what I have on the slide here is a newspaper article from the Chicago Tribune back in 2014. This is in response to a kid who was shot by the police 16 times. The newspaper article basically is justifying this shooting because the kid was on PCP, or the kid had PCP in his system when they did a toxicology postmortem. Okay? Now, what I will do now is I'd like to give a trigger warning, right? Because I'm going to show the actual video of the kid being shot, and you can see that the story, that the actual demonstration or evidence conflicts with the story that was told. And it's just a quick video, and I don't really want to show you guys this, but it's part of the lie, and it's important to know it. So this is the kid walking down the street. Laquan McDonald's is his name. The police roll up. He's walking away. One of the police officers pulls out the gun, shoots the guy 16 times. But the story was that Laquan McDonald lunged at the police with a knife, and so the police had to shoot him because he was on PCP. And this happened in Chicago when who was mayor? Rahm Emanuel, Obama's guy, was mayor. And this was concealed. This was kept under wraps for a year until some industrious journalists with the Freedom of the Information Act got access to the video. Once that happened, they quickly fired the police officer, and the story changed. The point is that when we engage in things like exceptionalism, it permits this type of behavior against people who use other drugs. It permits this sort of constant vilification of these folks. Back in 2020, when we were all locked down, I wrote a piece for the journal called Neuron, and I was explaining how our focus as a country and drug researchers, people like me, have contributed to exaggerating the harmful effects of drugs on the brain, and this constant exaggeration has contributed to the killing of Black folks. If we think about what happened to George Floyd, you may have seen the video and seen the cops who were protecting the perimeter, yelling at the kids or admonishing the kids. This is what happens when you use drugs. That's what one of them said, as if it's okay to abuse someone if they use certain drugs. Now, I'm gonna wrap up here in a second and so we can have some questions. One of the crowning ironies of this sort of exceptionalism, this is a story with many ironies, but one of the crowning ironies is that today there are many places where EMTs, they give ketamine to calm people down, right? The aggression, the violence that we said was provoked by PCP, we give PCP's sister to deal with, to subjugate the folks who are suspected, who are deemed uncontrollable. Now, in this particular case, this is the case of Elijah McCain, the 23-year-old guy from Aurora, Colorado, who was killed in August of 2019. He was given a large dose of ketamine, something like 500 milligrams, and an excessively large dose of ketamine. He died. He was given this dose of ketamine because the police were asking the EMT to do it. And so it's just one of the sort of ironies in the story. But I want to leave you with this take-home message. Now, when we engage in this sort of psychedelic exceptionalism, which is not warranted, it's dangerous and even deadly because what it does is that it really allows the sort of vilification of users of drugs not included in this category. That's one. And two, more importantly, what it does is that it allows the dehumanizing of people who use other drugs. And this dehumanization is the thing that really contributes to people getting killed. And so every time you engage in psychedelic exceptionalism, you're really contributing to this problem. And the psychedelic exceptionalism, many people know, particularly the folks who are in our government, they know that this psychedelic exceptionalism is an important tool, an important weapon in the war on drugs, because you need to have this sort of hierarchy of drugs as the society is learning more and more that they've been lied to about cannabis. Back in the 70s, Nixon was saying basically that alcohol was far more superior than cannabis, and his drug war really focused on cannabis. And so today, we have a number of writers, a number of opinion shapers who like some of these drugs, drugs in this class, like LSD, DMT, psilocybin. And they like these drugs, so they write, they speak more favorably about these drugs. And they are persuasive, and so we have to shift and have to make sure that we didn't vilify those other drugs, certainly more than we have before. Now, when I think about this issue, the opinion makers and their drugs of choice, I think about places like Burning Man. So if you've ever been to Burning Man, I've been to Burning Man, and what is about 70, 80,000 people go to the desert in Nevada for about 10 days. A lot of drug use going on, a lot of sex, a lot of unconventional sex, orgies, and so forth. But when we have our conversations about the drug problem, that sort of scene is never included, nor should it be. But it's just remarkable that everybody knows what takes place there, but we never talk about it when we talk about the drug problem. And there's far more drug taking that's going on in that space than the majority of places around the country. Now, I make that point because the folks who are there primarily are the wealthier people among us. It costs $500 to get in that place, and if you bring a vehicle, that's another $500. And so it's a place for the elite, and so that's why we don't talk about it. But many of those people who are there are opinion makers, and so that's my real concern, and so I go about my life trying to call that out and call out hypocrisy wherever I see it. And with that, let's have a discussion. Thank you for your time. Any questions? Okay, there's a microphone that's coming to you.
Okay, so I'm a child of the 80s too, when crack was whack for me. And I have a difficulty, I agree with everything you said. I have no problem with that. And stuck in my craw is that certain drugs have a certain profile of addiction that's separate from the US's relationship to criminality and drug use and the impact of that. Put that on the side burner here and talk about the addiction profile and the harms caused by the drug itself and its addiction profile and the impact of that.
Thank you so much for that question. You know, I was asked to talk about exceptionalism, and so I didn't talk about the addiction, and which I do often, and in all of my books I talk about that. And so the most important thing that you should know is that when we're talking about use of any of these drugs, from heroin to cannabis to methamphetamine. The vast majority of users of any of those drugs don't meet criteria for what we call addiction, right? But that's not the story that we say. That's one. And two, when we think about the problems that we have attributed to addiction, like in the 80s, like you and I, we got hoodwinked. I thought, for example, I've written about this extensively. You know, I have cousins, friends, other relatives who've been arrested for crack and used crack, and I attributed their bad behavior to crack. I misattributed their bad behavior to crack. Not looking at the environment in which I grew up in which I was raised, and not thinking about all of those sort of issues, but instead blaming crack because it was a lot easier to blame crack than to say, all right, we didn't educate folks. We discriminated against certain communities. We pulled out jobs, and then the factories left. And then we replaced them with jobs that really didn't pay a living wage, you know? And so there are a wide range of these more complicated issues that we just prefer not to deal with because it's complicated on the one hand, and it's just easier just to vilify a drug that a very small percentage of the population uses. And so you can make up incredible stories about it and be believed. Like in the 1930s, we said that people who smoke cannabis would kill their mother or go on to use heroin and so forth. And we were believed, and we outlawed cannabis. Now you say that, people think you're silly. But you go back and you read like government reports, you read testimony in front of Congress, it's the same thing. But then if you go back even further to, I don't know, the turn of the 20th century, 1914, when we passed our first national laws, we did the same thing. We vilified powder cocaine use. When it was associated with Black people, we said that they became better marksmen. They were unaffected by 32 caliber bullets, and they were more murderous. And Southern police forces increased the caliber of their weapon as a result. So all of these things, I learned only later that we've said all of these things before. But the most important thing is that the majority of people who use any of these drugs don't meet criteria for addiction and never will. And addiction is not about the drug. Addiction, if you got the vast majority of any drug the vast majority of users of any drug are not being addicted, it tells you to look somewhere else for problems that you are attributing to the drug. I hope that helps, but I certainly understand. Thank you for that question. And your question in spirit looks like you initiated more conversation. Thank you again.
It seems difficult to prevent psychedelic exceptionalism, which seems likely to emerge as a result along the privatization and promotion of psychedelic therapy. What strategies do you think individuals or policymakers can employ to prevent this from happening? And although a lot of psychedelic research is funded privately, do you think it would be beneficial to control the distribution of psychedelics instead of have it like all-inclusive access? Yeah, thank you.
Wait, hold up. I need you to clarify your question to focus on the one that you want me to answer, because I don't want to work that hard.
So what do you think policymakers and individuals can do to prevent psychedelic exceptionalism in the face of the privatization and promotion of psychedelic therapy?
Yes, thank you. So I don't know what governments can do. I don't know, but we're here in an educational setting. And we are in an educational setting because we want to know truth. We want to get at what's real and versus what's not. And so education just in general will go a long way in helping people not to do this, because they will understand the dire consequences of doing such a thing. So I hope that, like, you being here will make sure that you tell people when you see them engaged in this activity. I hope you help them to understand that it's not warranted and that it's dangerous. Thank you for the question.
Hello, Dr. Hart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your talk.
Thank
I'm
you.
a big fan. I've read Drug Use for Grown-Ups.
Thank you.
In the book, and today you describe a shift in your mindset and how you understand drugs and their effects, the laws behind them, crack and cocaine. Just curious, I know this is a loaded question, forgive me. Can you tell us a little bit of the psychology of that process? Was it a waking up moment? Was there a specific moment? Was it protracted? Did it feel like you were being lied to? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, that's a hell of a question. First of all, as you may know, I know in the movies we portray these kind of like aha moments, you know, eureka. That didn't happen like that. It was a gradual process, and not only that, it's a process in which I still go back and forth questioning my current position, questioning my previous ones, and I'm always interrogating where I'm at. And so it's a very long, slow process, and it's one of these things where you don't want to believe that you personally are kind of contributing to people's misery or people's harm. And you personally, you don't want to believe that you're contributing, one. And two, you don't want to believe that your government is contributing to that as well. And so or the people, or your countrymen and women, right? You don't want to believe it. And so I always go back and forth, and I'm always trying to feel more optimistic about people. And so I always have these sort of revelations. And so I'm still on that journey, to be honest with you. Thank you for the question. The mic is coming around.
Hey, I'm a psychiatrist here in Boston. Thanks for an awesome talk. I'm a big fan as well. I wondered if you could speak a little bit to the roles that neuroscience and medical science have played in colluding with these sort of narratives that you described here. Because one of the huge issues, obviously, in all of the research about how bad drugs are, if you throw tens of billions of dollars in government research to prove drugs are bad, drugs are going to be bad. You have specialists going out saying, my study shows that drugs are bad, and you just have this reinforcing cycle. And I think, you know, the corollary to that is that we have this sort of brain-based model of mental illness, which might have some truth, but has been vastly simplified. In the case of substance use disorder, has been used to objectify individuals who use drugs. So I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the role that this has played and how people in medical science research can push back on some of this.
Thank you for that question. The piece that I wrote for Neuron speaks directly to that. That piece is calling out my fellow drug researchers, fellow scientists. You may know people like Roland Griffiths. All of these folks were dear friends. And they all know what I just said, but they won't dare say it publicly. And I call them out in this piece. And so, I mean, it's really bad. I mean, we had someone who was the head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, that funds the research in this area, who was using an illicit drug, but didn't say and got that position and never came out of the closet about their drug use. And so that kind of hypocrisy in the face of people suffering, it just, it really makes me not want to live in a country with people like that. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Hello, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first one is related with the psychedelic exceptionalism, and I will be straight to the point. Which is your proposal to overcome this psychedelic exceptionalism? I come from Mexico.
Yes.
And I completely agree that if we don't overcome with this psychedelic exceptionalism, there are a lot of social issues involved.
Yes.
In Mexico, it's not very common, for example, to distinguish between psychedelics, stimulants, and depressors. Everything is drugs, and there are this classification is killing people. This is the first one. Which is your proposal? A complete decriminalization, or which is in your mind?
Yes.
And the second one is related with the classification of psychedelics. Have you ever considered, for example, the effect of the substance in the central nervous system, especially, for example, the action in receptors 5-HT2-1? Because, for example, Salvia divinorum, it's not it's considered a psychedelic, but it works on the kappa receptors, the opioid receptor.
Kappa, yep.
Yeah. And cannabis, of course, acts on CB1 and CB2 receptors. This action on a specific neuroreceptor could be a criteria to classify the psychedelics. This is not for an immediate question, but these are my two questions.
Thank you. The first, I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. The second one is like our sort of reductionistic outlook or viewing of these drugs by saying, for example, it acts at the 5-HTA1 receptor versus another receptor. Drugs don't work like that. Just because we are limited right now, well, let me take a step back. So in psychiatry, the major sort of theory that we use in order to treat patients for schizophrenia, depression, whatever, is based on the monoamine theory of mood. And basically, I'll simplify it. Monoamine neurotransmitters like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, lower levels lead to more depressed mood, increased levels lead to mania and psychosis or something of that nature. That's the simple sort of view. When that theory was proposed, we're talking 60s, late 1960s, we knew about maybe 6 or 7 neurotransmitters. That theory has not been appreciably really updated. And now we know about, about more than 100, right? And the numbers continuing to grow. And so the notion that drugs act here and not here is silly. Drugs act in multiple places beyond our current capability to really understand all of it. And so our sort of reductionistic focus is contributing to this thing. Now, when you asked about decriminalization and so forth, I started out by saying that I'm a patriot, and when I should have explained what I meant. I mean that in the strictest sense, in that this country was founded on some really good principles, even though they were given to us or told to us. They were plagiarized, but they were popularized by people who we might dislike today, like Thomas Jefferson or whatever, even though that may be the case for people. The principles outlived him, and the principles will, because the principles is that everybody should have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's a very simple thing. It's bodily autonomy. It's all of these things. The founding of the country said that that's what we were going to do. But yet, we restrict what some adult puts in their body. It's a really, it's a blatant violation of the founding principle. And I'm always astonished that so many Americans are not up in arms. That's what makes this place America. It's the thing that other countries have kind of copied in some respects, but we copied it as well. Damn near every democracy has that in their constitution. And so with that as a backdrop, I think we should legally regulate these drugs. And then that way we can control quantity, quality of control, the quality, a wide range of things. And so decriminalization for me is a joke, but I understand you have to laugh along the way to progress. I understand. So.
I think that will do it for our questions today, but please give another thank you to Dr. Hart here.
I just want to thank you all for coming out today. Thank you all for coming. And I apologize. I really apologize for being long-winded in my responses. That meant that more people couldn't ask questions. I really am so sorry. But thank you for coming.
And with that, I'll invite our Associate Director of the CSWR to close us out here, Gosia Sklodowska.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much, Professor Hart. It was an incredibly powerful talk, and thank you for leaving us with many important and hard questions, take-home messages to ponder on. We have wrapped up our conference and all the programming for the day, but before I share some events and engagement opportunities, I wanted to invite you to join me in extending heartfelt gratitude to the two keynote speakers, Professor Hart and Dr. Luna, all the panelists and workshop instructors. It's been an incredibly fulfilling day, so thank you for that. And thank you also to all of you for being with us today. I know that some of you traveled from out of state or out of the country, or even from across the world to be here today. So thank you for being here and engaging in many meaningful, rich conversations with the speakers and with each other. We hope that all the connections, conversations that you started will be continuing beyond the conference. Your presence and engagement here really underscores the significance and timeliness of the topics that we covered today. It was very clear and evident from the presentations, discussions, and the questions that were asked that there is much more ground to cover, and this is precisely what we're intending to do in the next months and years. There are lots of programs, events on the horizon, both within our center and more broadly across the university, that would be of interest to you, we hope, and that we encourage you to attend. Just within the center, we are continuing a long-running series within our Transcendence Transformation Initiative focused on psychedelics and the future of religion. Just within this series, we have 4 amazing events on the horizon. Those are all panels that we have happening on Zoom virtually. You will see some familiar faces joining us for those panels. Less than 2 weeks from now, on February 28th, will be hosting a presentation with Yvan Bossin, who was part of our panel earlier today. He will be joined by his colleagues from Dana-Farber, presenting on psilocybin and spiritual care at end of life. In March, we'll be hosting a talk focused on the curious case of integration. This will be based on ethnographic research with an integration group in Alabama, focusing on how this group's beliefs intersect with Christianity. And in April, we'll be hosting 2 book talks. The first one is with Andre van der Braak, Ayahuasca as Liquid Divinity. This book is focusing not on ayahuasca experiences, but rather ayahuasca-based ritual practices and how they are used to cultivate relationships between humans and more than human powers. And on April 30th, we have invited Eric Davis for an in-person talk, Blotter, the Untold Story of an Acid Medium. Eric will be exploring the history of blotter paper and its transition from its origins to the current status as an art collectible object. On April 16th, we're thrilled to announce that we'll be launching a new talk series focused on ethics and psychedelics. Ethics was a topic that has surfaced through many of the conversations, and this is something that we deserve much more focus. We're thrilled to be partnering with Petri Flom at Law School for our inaugural event. We'll be inviting researchers and speakers to share legal, medical, therapeutical, and spiritual perspectives to help us define key ethical concepts and considerations that can be applied in a very fast evolving landscape of psychedelic legalization and use. Mason Marks will be part of our first panel, along with Christina Hauskeller, a philosopher from the University of Exeter. Within the center, we'll be also opening several postdoctoral fellowships that are aligned with the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative. The few that I would like to highlight are focused on psychedelics and spirituality. Another opening will be in religion and indigenous plant medicine traditions of the Americas. And another one, another fellowship will be focused on African and Africa diaspora religions. We invite you to reach out to us with any questions about those opportunities. And finally, there are 2 events on the horizon that are hosted by our partners at Harvard, Mahindra Humanities Centers and Petri Flom at Law School. Along with these 2 groups, we are part of the Harvard Study of Psychedelics in Society of Culture. The first event at Mahindra Center is just a few days away on February 20th. The title is Cruel Optimism, The Politics of LSD. A graduate student, Alexis Turner, representing his research on the political hopes and fears behind the rise and fall of studies of psychedelics in the US. And in June, Petri Flom is organizing a conference annual symposium on the topic of the law and policy of psychedelic medicine. So I invite you warmly to participate in all of these events. If you have joined our mailing list, you'll be hearing from us about all of these and many more events. I'm sorry, I'm running out of, I need some water. Well, in any case, thank you so much for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Sponsor, Center for the Study of World Religions.
Copyright 2024, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.